I saw a tweet recently that I keep thinking about. The person tweeted, "Some people go to a pizza party and, fearing the pizza will run out, grab 3 slices, while others, fearing the same thing, will take 1 to leave some for others." We've all met that kid. Maybe we've been that kid. Maybe we are that kid. Which one are you? Do you load up and take care of yourself, or do you take a minimum to make sure that there's enough for others? Well, maybe if we make the example more Jewish, it'll be easier to relate to. At the brunch buffet, fearing the lox will run out, some people load their bagels with it, while others, fearing the same, leave some for others. I feel like that's what we're seeing in our world right now. People who just take care of their own interests and those who look out for others. The difference is stark, and it's starting to have a real effect on our everyday lives. I feel like in Canada, we tend more toward the latter way with our socialized medicine and public universities, but more and more I'm seeing an inclination toward the former, and I'm concerned. I'm so concerned, in fact, that I find the need to articulate what I believe Judaism says about this problem, about how much we take at the buffet, and then what we ought to do about it when we see someone taking all the lox. You have no doubt heard me or other rabbis teach the principle that all Israel is responsible one for another. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh. This means effectively that we are our brother's keepers. We must not stand idly by while our neighbor bleeds. We must not remain indifferent to the pain, suffering, or plight of others. We are to take care of the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. That's basic stuff, Judaism 101. And so, throughout this pandemic, we have taken every precaution to keep everyone safe through masking, isolating, quarantine, and washing. As vaccines have become available, the mainstream Jewish communities jumped on the opportunity to vaccinate ourselves, not only for our own personal health and safety, but for the well-being of those around us, especially those who are immunocompromised. And children, of course, who are not yet eligible for the vaccines. Rabbinical voices from every stream of Judaism spoke up to say, this is a Jewish value. We all understand this. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir about this aspect, since all of us here are vaccinated and had no problem showing proof of that vaccination as we entered or before. We value keeping each other safe, and so you're sitting here with masks on, and those of us on the bima who are removing our masks were tested today to ensure that we're not endangering others unknowingly. What about those who refuse to follow basic safety measures to keep others safe? What about those who take all the lox because it's their right? What is our obligation vis-a-vis those people? Do we call them out? Do we enter into wars of words on Facebook? Do we turn away and say, good luck to them? Ecclesiastes tells us, there is a time to stay silent and a time to speak up. How do we know when to speak up? A clue to the answer is found, wouldn't you know it, right in the middle of the Torah. Ancient books have a certain structure. Rather than build throughout it to the climax and then have a short denouement, texts that date roughly to the same time of the Torah put their most important aspects right smack dab in the middle. What's in the middle of the Torah? This beautiful line in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 7. Lo tisna et achicha bilvavecha, hocheach tochiach et amitecha, velo tisa alav chet. You shall not hate your kinsfolk in your heart, reprove your kinsman, but incur no guilt because of him. Now, this is a hard verse to translate because of the nature of the Hebrew. One of my colleagues translates it like this. You must not keep bad blood toward your brother in your heart. You should admonish your fellow so that you will not have to bear his guilt. In other words, if you observe your brother, usually meaning your fellow Israelite or someone who is living as part of your community, if you see this person doing something wrong, ostensibly breaking a commandment, it's your obligation to say something. Otherwise, you're just as guilty as she is. Or as my kids would say, if you see something, say something. Don't just take care of yourself, helping yourself to all the locks. Help the other guy. Leave some for him. In the world of Torah, there is no such thing as mind your own business. Your business is my business, and my business is your business. In fact, this verse doesn't just suggest that we maybe should say something. On the contrary, it becomes a commandment, a mitzvah, to admonish one another, because we are responsible for each other. But even beyond being responsible for each other, we do this out of love. Look at the verse that follows this one. Same chapter. Next verse, 18. Lo tikom v'lo titor et b'nei amecha ve'ahavta l'reyecha kamocha ani Adonai. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. I am the Eternal. To be sure, love and reproof go hand in hand. As Rabbi Yossi notes in the Midrash, he says, love without reproof is not love. And the sage Reish Lakish replies, and peace where there has been no reproof is not real peace. Criticizing, rebuking someone, calling them out, that's not easy. We're never sure of how our critique will be received and what type of response will come back at us. Our ancient rabbis had the same challenge. There really is nothing new under the sun. The Babylonian Talmud recounts an exchange between two prominent rabbis, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Elazar complains to Rabbi Akiva that no one of his generation seems able to accept critique. Rabbi Akiva responds, by God, I don't know of anyone in this generation who knows how to deliver critique. Indeed, if we look at our role as loving our neighbor and offering rebuke in a loving way out of concern, rather than seeking to one-up or embarrass someone or catch them in a lie or a sin, maybe the message will be received in the spirit in which it was intended. Remember Rabbi Yossi saying, love without reproof is not real love? If we love and care for others, we want what is best for them. So if we see them going astray, it is incumbent upon us to say something, to offer help, to alert them to the pit into which they are about to fall. And if they won't take our advice, but their behavior is endangering others, it's our duty to compel them to alert others or to do it ourselves. This is really hard, especially when the person who seems to require our reproof is an authority figure, a parent, a teacher, a community leader. We might ask, who am I to tell that person that she's wrong? Who am I to challenge another's authority? The answer is that we are lovers of Torah, people who take our responsibility to others and for others seriously. And that includes the person whom we might need to rebuke. Alerting a parent, friend, family member, or even community leader to dangerous behavior doesn't mean that we are against them in any way. On the contrary, it means that we are on their side to such an extent that we want to prevent them from harming themselves or others. This applies to the people that we love, and it also applies to the places and the countries that we love. I know that many people here would disagree with me where Israel is concerned, but I contend that our love for Israel obligates us to speak up if or when we feel that Israel's government is going astray. Some might say that only self-hating Jews and anti-Semites criticize Israel, but I disagree. Because when I criticize Israel's policies or actions, it's from a place of love and of wanting Israel to be that light to the nations that it was meant to be. And yes, I realize that my standing up for speaking freely about Israel gives an opening for anti-Semites to do the same, but that is the price we pay for free speech. We are also free to refute them and expose their anti-Semitism. Healthy relationships are healthy because the partners can give and receive critical feedback. It's given out of love. To stifle all criticism is dangerous. It leads to tensions mounting until a big explosion happens over a seemingly innocuous matter. As we have learned, love without critique is not love. Peace without critique is not peace. It is no accident that the verse about rebuking our neighbor comes right before the commandment to love our neighbor. The two go together. For the record, I stand with Israel, firmly. I stand with Israel so strongly that I hold Israel to the highest standards of our faith. I recognize that Israel is a humanly flawed democracy, just like any other. And just as we can critique Canada or the United States or any other country, we can and should critique Israel. As a Jew, I do it with love. Never is there a question as to whether Israel should or should not exist, chas v'shalom. Just as Canada's flawed policies and troubling past do not make me question whether Canada should endure as a sovereign state. I'm proud of so much about Israel. Its unique position as the only democracy in the Middle East, its humanitarian actions when disaster strikes anywhere in the world, its innovations and advancements in technology and research, its social acceptance and celebration of the LGBTQ community, holding the only Pride Day in the region. And I'm also hurt by some of what Israel stands for and represents, with its threats to religious pluralism, the rise of nationalism, discrimination against Israel's non-Jewish citizens, and the rise in anti-Arab racism, not to mention Israel's denial of who I am as a female rabbi, as ultra-Orthodox rabbis and politicians actively seek to deny the equal place of women, Jews by choice, LGBTQ people, and all non-Orthodox Jews. And we haven't even touched on the complicated and nuanced history of our dealings with the Palestinians. I feel it's my duty to speak up about these things precisely because I love Israel. Because I want to fulfill the vision of the early Zionists and the prophets who envisioned this Jewish state not only as a haven for all Jews of all walks of life, but as an example of the type of modern country that exemplifies the beauty of Torah, mitzvot, and ethical living. I must speak up because that's what love entails. When I have a disagreement with my husband and criticize him, or he critiques me, or we disagree about a decision or what have you, we don't love each other any less, even in the midst of the argument. In fact, at the end of the day, our love grows because we come to a new place and a new understanding. And we see that we care so much about one another and about the life that we're building together that we actually want to bother to have the conversation. Love without reproof is not real love because it would mean that we don't care. If we care, we strive to help one another be better and do better. I don't want to be part of a relationship, community, religion, society, or country where dialogue is silenced, where constructive criticism isn't respected and embraced. Thoughtful dissent is the cornerstone on which Jewish religious thought and discourse is built. As a people who has survived persecutions and anti-Semitism in every generation, as a community who honors the memory of those who perished in the Shoah, we know all too well what can happen when dissenting voices are silenced. We are responsible for one another, and we have an obligation to speak up, to call out wrong action, whether that action belongs to our peer or our superior, a government or a community, or even ourselves. In secular society, we like to talk about our rights, but in Judaism, we talk about our responsibilities. The Torah is not only our rule book for how we are to live, but also our bill of responsibilities. Sometimes living up to those responsibilities is hard or even uncomfortable. But we're all in this together. So let's help each other through it. Let's offer our tochacha, our reproof, out of love. And let us receive it in peace. And may we all be stronger, healthier, and happier for it, because that is what love entails. May it be God's will.